must do is embrace the vision.
What's good, Vision Gang? You already know what it is. This is your boy, DaVizion, and I'm back again with another MMA reaction. Today, I am reacting to MMA On Point. Love MMA On Point videos. This is 10 UFC fighters who should have changed weight classes sooner. So I'm assuming these UFC fighters were in one weight class struggling. They either went up or down to a more natural, easy or unnatural weight where they're able to have an advantage or just more comfortable at, and they were able to succeed. So that's what I'm guessing, and I'm really done talking. If you haven't already done so, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to be first to see the videos, and go ahead and jab that like button to send this video to the moon. And let's get started with the video. Let's go.
Weight cutting is a part of MMA, right? Somehow we've gotten to the point where if you're not sweating out your bodily fluids to make weight, then you're probably at a massive disadvantage against those that are. And there's been plenty of fighters who've changed weight class in their career. Some have gone up because the weight cut was too difficult. Some have come down and enjoyed now being bigger in another weight class. Even recently, we've seen the former 125 champ Deiveson Figueiredo go up to bantamweight and look pretty damn good. Sometimes, though, it's taken a while for fighters to find what seems to be the right weight class for them. And today, we're going to look at those guys. I'm Bailey in from MMA On Point. Shout out to all you Hall of Famers. Appreciate you. Thank you for all the support, guys. And these are 10 fighters who should have changed weight class sooner. Quick disclaimer, okay guys, before we get started, I want to just eliminate a few people who you might think would make it on this list. We're not talking about guys who did better at a weight class, but fighters who could have switched sooner. Someone like Jorge Masvidal switched to welterweight and completely restarted his career, but when you look at his record, he actually has more losses at welterweight than at lightweight, and he beat some great competition at that weight as well. It's kind of hard to say he should have switched sooner. Robbie Lawler, right, he went back to welterweight after Strikeforce and won a UFC title. But to be honest, it kind of feels like that was his last chance in the UFC. He hadn't enjoyed his time in Strikeforce, and yeah, he was fighting at middleweight, but it was the motivation to be back in the UFC that led him to change the weight class. That wasn't going to happen until he got back in the promotion. Hopefully you understand what we're going for with this one, but let's get the video started.
Let's go ahead and see.
Number 10, Jared Cannonier. I
just learned about this dude. He
was a former heavyweight who was undergone one of the
decent and went against Izzy and lost and had a boring fight or something. Never got his rematch, even though he beat Sean Strickland.
Administration in Alaska, a place I actually know very little about other than seeing all those vampires take over in 30 Days a Night. Still, there is a pretty decent MMA scene up in Anchorage, and Cannonier started fighting in AFC. At the time, he weighed in excess of 230 pounds, and honestly, I can't blame him. It's bloody cold up there. He won the belt and got an invite to the UFC and made his debut at a healthy 235 pounds against Sean Jordan. But that was the end of Jared's undefeated streak. He was dropped and finished by the bigger man.
Nervous event, absolutely. Oh, he got that! And he got rocked! Right on cue! That's it!
Jared had one more fight at heavyweight before deciding to drop at 205, but even there, he didn't have much success either. 5'11" isn't super tall, and he was getting out-muscled by guys like Glover Teixeira, Jan Blachowicz, and Dominic Reyes. He had just 3 wins and 4 losses when he decided to drop down another weight class to middleweight, and he soon realized
that's a huge transition.
A middleweight is only a light heavyweight who's very disciplined. They just cut more weight.
He carried a ton of power down from heavyweight, but now was the same size as everyone else, and even in the last 5 years, he's only lost twice at middleweight and has managed to get 7 wins and a title shot. Number 9, Dan Hooker. Most of you might not know that Dan has competed in several weight classes during his combat sports career. He started MMA in 2009, and for the first 5 years or so had a bit of an up and down career, but it included fighting as high as heavyweight. What?
Damn.
What the fuck? He even won the King of the Ring middleweight championship in kickboxing just a few years later.
Doubling up on the jab, and there's the body. Oh, it's Tommy's been dropped! A liver shot has paralyzed the electric eel!
In 2014, he was signed by the UFC to join a fight night card in New Zealand, and he started in the promotion as a featherweight. Dan had 6 fights in the next 2 years and went just 3-3 at 145, dropping decisions to Maximo Blanco, Yair Rodriguez, and Jason Knight. Dan was competitive, but he also was getting dropped on occasion and didn't really have the same kind of speed as some of the other featherweights. I'm sure also that the weight cut was an absolute nightmare for a guy 6 foot tall, so after his loss to Jason Knight, Hooker moved up to lightweight.
I saw a quote the other day and it says, I never make the same mistake twice. I make it 5 or 6 times just to be sure, and after the 6th time, I was sure.
It was a fantastic decision, and he immediately won 7 of his next 8 fights. His only loss coming in that absolutely mental show of toughness against Edson Barbosa. That all got down inside the top 10 at 155, where he's still competing against the best, and even a recent return to featherweight against Arnold Allen showed lightweight is definitely the best place for him. Number 8, Gilbert Burns. Although he might seem a little short for a welterweight, it's pretty hard to deny that Gilbert Burns hasn't had a ton of success in the welterweight division. But he didn't start in the UFC at 170. Gilbert was made famous in the combat sports world where he won gold twice as a black belt at the Jiu-Jitsu World Championships. He's also won medals elsewhere, but the thing is, they were all pretty much around the 170-pound mark. Now, weight cutting isn't really much of a thing in Jiu-Jitsu, but Gilbert was essentially having no trouble being a world champion at welterweight. Fast forward about 2 years and Gil makes his UFC debut as a welterweight. He wins and immediately switches to lightweight and picks up 2 more victories, making him 10-0, a real UFC prospect. But that's when things started to go downhill for Gilbert. Across the next 3 years, he'd go 5-3 as a lightweight, dropping decision losses to Rashid Magomedov, Michel Prazeres, and he looked just a little drained and was eventually KO'd by Dan Hooker, his first stoppage loss in his career.
He'll be looking for
Burns decided to make the switch back to welterweight, where he started running through the division. He won 4 straight with 2 performances of the night, and he got a title shot up against Usman.
He got a title shot.
Picked up 7
well,
wins
lost
at
against
welterweight
Usman.
and stayed
That's
at
decent.
the top of the division, only dropping losses.
He did a lot better at welterweight.
Something he couldn't achieve at lightweight. Number 7, Kelvin Gastelum. If you've been a fan of the sport for a while, you probably know that Kelvin Gastelum has had some trouble in the past with his weight. He was the last guy picked for the teams on Tough, but he won the season as a middleweight. At 5'9", it's no secret that's pretty small for 85, but can we really say he was actually better off at welterweight? Just hear me out here. After the Tough win, he immediately switched to welterweight. At first, he got 4 wins in a row, but they weren't exactly against top competition. I mean, the biggest name he beat was Jake Ellenberger. He was on a 2-fight losing streak at the time, still a pretty good name. Kelvin also missed weight for the first fight right before that, and when he was given a top 5 welterweight in Tyron Woodley, he missed weight again.
It just seems like a nightmare trying to cut weight
in his performance this time. Gastelum had to go up to middleweight after this, and guess what? He won by TKO, but then it was back to welterweight against Neil Magny, and he lost. He bounced back up against Johnny Hendricks, but Kelvin also missed weight in that one. Then he pulled out of his fight against Donald Cerrone because of another weight issue, and Dana pretty much forced him to go up to middleweight.
You know, everything was going according to plan to how I've had my last weight cuts. You know, this time my body just decided to pull a quick one on me and said, nope, not this time.
But Gastelum actually started to perform really well. He TKO'd Tim Kennedy, who had long been
went back up to 185. He's more natural at 185, seems like.
Eventually he did so well he found himself in an interim title fight against Israel Adesanya, and he gave the champ the toughest fight of his career up to that point. I know a lot of people like Joe Rogan have said he should have figured out the weight situation and gone back to welterweight, but well, he just did that recently against Sean Brady, and it didn't really help at all. In fact, it was one of his worst performances. Granted, Gastelum is perhaps getting a bit long in the tooth, but side by side, he outperformed himself at welterweight, and you know, he missed weight 4 times there as well. Number 6, Michael Bisping. The Count is another guy who won the Ultimate Fighter at a different weight class to where he ended up competing in the UFC. But unlike Kelvin, Mike didn't switch right away, and it probably wasn't the best idea. Initially, Bisping started his career as a light heavyweight. He was a big guy who ate pasties and sausage rolls, and after winning the Ultimate Fighter, he stayed that way for his first few UFC fights. He blasted Eric Schaefer and had to fight the night with Elvis Sinosic, which was more competitive than perhaps it should have been with an undefeated guy like Mike. Then he went up against Matt Hamill, and it was pretty clear Mike was not as strong as the American wrestler. He was taken down 6 times and controlled by the bigger man, but still got the nod, although quite controversially from the judges. However, his next fight against Rashad Evans, a guy who'd won Tough at heavyweight, showed again that perhaps 205 probably wasn't the best weight class for Mike. He was taken down 6 times and controlled again for most of the fight. After that, Mike switched to middleweight, and although he knew nothing about weight cutting at first and started out dieting and starving himself down to 185, he eventually found his stride and managed to win a world title.
That's Luke Rocco. Ain't that the dude? He lose an eye.
Never have achieved if he stayed at the light heavyweight.
He didn't know how to.
Number 5, Chael Sonnen.
He didn't have trainers and stuff, people to help him do that.
And even won a regional tournament early on, but eventually ran into bigger guys who had trouble controlling, like Forrest Griffin in the IFC. In 2005, Chael got his first invitation to fight in the UFC, and it was at light heavyweight.
A lot of people talk to me about giving up some size to Babalu. You know, I push people Babalu size out of the way looking for somebody to fight.
He took on Renato Sobral and found himself in a triangle choke, and just a few months later, the same thing happened against Jeremy Horn. By the time he returned to the UFC 3 years later, though, he transitioned to middleweight, where his wrestling game just seemed to be more effective, and was probably the division he should have been in all along. Okay. After an initial loss to Damian Maia, Chael went on a 3-fight win streak.
Probably one of the best to never win a UFC championship.
After that, he beat 2 other top middleweights to earn a rematch, and he was definitely one of the best middleweights in the UFC. He then went back up to light heavyweight after that, though, and it didn't really go well. He was often outsized in that weight class, and at middleweight, his wrestling was just way more effective. We'll just skip past the heavyweight part at the end of his career. Number 4, John Lineker. Roberto Duran was the original Hands of Stone. The boxer won 72 fights in 12 years and lost just once, so it's not likely that people let the nickname just go to anyone else. But in MMA, the Brazilian John Lineker took up the mantle, and absolutely nobody complained. John debuted in the UFC at flyweight, but immediately missed weight, coming in at 127. He still won Fight of the Night against Luis Galdino, but he was also finished by a guillotine. He then had 7 more UFC fights as a flyweight, and only lost 1 of them, but he missed weight in 3 of them, and it kind of showed against Ali Bagautinov. He perhaps just didn't have the speed to compete with some of the best of the division. It was clear he'd been sacrificing his body as well, and in some cases his performances to make the weight.
I wasn't managing to stay at that weight and fight at that weight, so you know, I wasn't going to insist on it, and it wasn't my choice anyway.
He moved up to bantamweight, and Hands of Stone ran through 4 opponents, picking up 2 bonuses, and got his biggest fight in the UFC. That was a title eliminator against TJ Dillashaw. Now, he showed some holes in his takedown defense in that one, but also that he is basically impossible to knock out.
Jaw of steel.
But John's only other loss at bantamweight came in an extremely close split decision to Corey Sandhagen. After that, he headed to ONE, where he started competing at 145 pounds under their hydration testing system, and he became the champion over there, proving once again he really was better off not cutting weight all along. Number 3, Sean Strickland. At one point in time, the future UFC middleweight champion was a fantastic prospect. Outside of the UFC, he went 13-0 as a pro before he got the call, and he did it almost entirely at middleweight. He even won and defended the King of the Cage 185 title 4 times. He took a short notice fight to get into the UFC and immediately won his first 2 fights at middleweight, and one of them was against the Englishman Luke Barnett, who's about 6'3", so Sean decided that he should probably go down to welterweight. But at 170, he immediately lost to Santiago Ponzinibbio. He carried a lot more muscle than Sean at the weight class and was able to physically outpower him as well as match his speed. That was the end of Sean's undefeated streak, and he would go on to lose twice more in the UFC at welterweight, eventually going 5-3 in the division, which is pretty good, but it's not the kind of consistency that would get you to a UFC title. After his motorcycle crash, Sean took some time away from the sport and was miraculously able to make a return, but this time at middleweight. He put on some muscle mass and looked a lot stronger than he had done at 170.
In life, sometimes you think the more you sacrifice and the more you suffer, you know, you'll get back. It's not really true, man. Like, you don't got to kill yourself to be successful.
Sean then went on a 5-fight win streak in the weight class where he was able to physically push around guys like Uriah Hall and Krzysztof Jotko. Since coming back to 185, he's won 8 and lost only twice. Coincidentally, only to guys who have fought above 185, and it's arguable he probably should have just stayed there in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was the biggest moment of his career.
Number 2, Charles Oliveira. Du Bronx is a guy who's jumped around a bunch of different weight classes across his 15-year career. He actually started as a welterweight in Brazil before switching to lightweight, and he went 12-0 on the regional scene before getting invited to the UFC, where he won his first 2 fights by submission as a lightweight. But then he lost to 2 of the division's top guys in Jim Miller and Donald Cerrone, which was due to probably more of an experience difference than a weight issue really, but he still decided to switch to featherweight. As a 145er, Charles definitely did alright in the weight class and continued to sub a bunch of guys, but after 5 years he was 7-5 as a UFC featherweight, and had also missed weight 4 times, and showed he was compromising himself to make the weight class. He looked drained, was getting knocked around when tagged on the chin.
Oh, good right hand over the top. And he's hurt. Yeah, he's done.
And didn't really have anywhere near the same power or snap in his punches. After losing 2 in a row to Anthony Pettis and then Ricardo Lamas, where Charles missed weight by 9 pounds, yeah, he literally weighed in at 155 for that one and still lost, Du Bronx decided to go back up to lightweight, and it was probably one of the best decisions in his career. He beat the Bellator champion Will Brooks, then dropped that loss to Paul Felder, but after that he went on an 11-fight win streak that saw him lay waste to the entire division and win the world title. His only weight miss was against Justin on some dodgy scales, and all of the other parts of his life came together to make him the best 155er in the world. Number 1, Anthony Johnson. Well, I think pretty much unanimously, the late great Rumble Johnson made it to the top of our hardest hitters list at light heavyweight, and for good reason. Do we need to play one of these replays again?
Right away. Interesting. Oh, my! Good Lord.
But he didn't start off his career that way. After becoming a junior college national wrestling champion at 184 pounds, and no doubt
he's somebody I need to react to for real.
Before he turned to mixed martial arts, just 3 wins into his 1-year career, he got the call to the UFC, where he debuted on short notice at welterweight and in 13 seconds flatlined Chad Reiner. In his next fight, however, he missed weight by 6 pounds and was then submitted in the second round, something that unfortunately became a bit of a habit for Rumble as a welterweight. Yeah, he still knocked plenty of people out quite viciously, but every time he stepped on the scale it looked so painful, and although he was an absolute killer at 170, he still got subbed by some of the guys in the division. It was his switch to middleweight and then missing weight by 11 pounds that led to the UFC actually letting him go, and when he went to Titan FC after that again at middleweight, he once again couldn't make 185. So he made the best decision of his career and moved up to light heavyweight. Over the next 5 years, he won 11 fights, including 1 win at heavyweight over Andrei Arlovski, and there was only one man who could stand up to him, and that was Daniel Cormier. As a light heavyweight, Rumble had even more power, was way harder to take down, and wasn't dealing with the speed of the welterweights, and he became one of the best KO artists of all time. Okay, all this video is based on, evidence and speculation on our part, the fan base, alright? If you want to really know why these guys didn't change weight class sooner, you should probably go and ask them. But we looked at the evidence today, and I think in this case, that is enough. That should be enough. Thank you, Mr. George Hutchinson, for editing this video.
It was a good video.
George, mate. Nice one.
Definitely a good video.
Not a fucking mean. I'm sorry, guys. He is from Essex, but you can follow him on the medias. You can check him out at G Hutchinson MMA if you want to show him some support. Keep an eye on what else he's up to, and just say a big fat thank you. MMA On Point channel champions, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for supporting us over here and the content. There they are. If you want to join them at any level, you can become an MMA On Point member and get some cool benefits. The link is in the description. Click the button down below, find out more. Thank you once again, channel champions. I thought this was a pretty good video. If you ask me, it was about food, weight cutting, not getting too fat. Like I said, there's a bit of speculation involved in this one, but we tried to get as much research as possible, and I think some of these fighters probably could have changed weight class. Go ask him yourself if you don't know. Leave a comment down below what you think. Like and subscribe if you want to see more from us. You don't have to, but you'll regret it. Maybe. I'll make you regret it.
Alright, y'all, that was MMA On Point. 10 UFC fighters who should have changed weight classes sooner. And yeah, that was a real good video, y'all. Sean Strickland definitely was somebody I knew was on there, as well as who was that on that list? I didn't know much about Anthony Johnson and his weight struggles, but Chael Sonnen, I knew he bounced around a little bit and didn't know he was best at middleweight, but I kind of figured that. I knew he was one of the better middleweights with that big fight he had with Anderson Silva, which he should have won. But yeah, there was just a lot of guys who were great at different weight classes than what they initially started off as, and I think a lot of it had to do with more most of it had to do with just being at a weight class where your body's more comfortable. I think cutting weight can be detrimental to some people. Some people, it makes them better because they're able to still keep their strength and their muscle, but some people, when they cut weight, they lose their muscle, they lose their strength, and yeah, it's probably real tough doing that. I couldn't imagine. Like I said in the earlier video, I've dropped some weight and I was a lot weaker, and it took me a long time to really get my strength back at that weight. So I couldn't imagine like only doing that for fights. Like, I don't know, I feel like I would probably try to stay around that weight, not cut that much, but that's just me. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos, you guys. If you are enjoying them and you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to be first to see the videos. What are you doing? And make sure you guys jab that like button to send this video to the moon. You don't gotta do none of that, but you really should, y'all. This is your boy DaVizion, and as always, you guys be safe, gift y'all, and I'm gonna see you next time. I'm out. Peace.